So we begin the teaching in a normal way with this symbolic offering of the mandala. We always do this at the beginning of teachings. I mean, it's the tradition to do so because we consider that the teachings are extremely precious in that if we utilize the teachings given by Buddha, we'll indeed find a source of happiness and freedom from suffering, and develop in ourselves the qualities of compassion and wisdom through which we can share the wonderful benefits of the Dharma with other beings. So if that is how precious an encounter with the Dharma is, then we should in a way make space in ourselves to listen to the Dharma, to put it into practice. And the best way to make space, in a way, is to give something, is to let go of one's attachment, one's grasping at things, to create an openness and a spaciousness inside oneself for the teachings. And therefore, this ritual of making a mandala and imagining that it kind of represents all the beauties and treasures that we find in the world, which we normally grasp onto and label as mine and try to possess, but this time instead we simply appreciate them and offer them up to the principle of enlightenment, of awakening, which is symbolized in the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And moreover, we do that with the sense, well, may this space I'm creating, this giving, this offering I'm doing, may it eventually flow to the benefit of other beings. So that it's an extremely beautiful and powerful way to begin to receive teachings, which is why we do this short prayer, this short ritual. It's the tradition to do so when teachings are given. But we don't do it just because it's the tradition. The tradition has a purpose and a meaning. It does something to us. Something very profound, something very beautiful. So we'll make that offering, and then after that we'll begin with the teaching itself. Today's teaching, which is of course on the 8 verses of mind training. So we're going to study this morning this short text called the 8 verses of mind training. So just to put it into context very briefly, when we study the Mahayana Dharma, there are 2 main ways to do that. One is to study the very extensive classical texts, which were composed mainly in India, although they have commentaries written by the Tibetan masters, which set out in great detail and great length the essential points of reflection, the points of practice, which we would do throughout our lifetime. So a kind of stage-by-stage presentation of the path. But the other way to study the Mahayana Dharma, which is complementary, it's not contradictory to the first, is by hearing the very short, pithy explanations to be put into practice both, as it were, in formal meditation and in everyday situations. So these are teachings which are concerned with, as it were, giving us access to the profound qualities of wisdom and compassion by looking right into our way of relating to things, looking right into our emotions and our perceptions, and bringing about a transformation in those emotions and perceptions, those ways we have of relating to the world. So this kind of short, pithy teaching in Sanskrit is called Upadesha, or in Tibet is called Damnak. And among this type of teaching, the most famous of the Damnak are the Lojong, as it's called in Tibetan, the mind training. The mind training. And the core of the mind training teaching is this, that right now, the source of suffering for us and others is our attachment to self, is our attachment to self-interest, placing our own interests above the interests of others. This attitude is deeply buried in us, deeply kind of ingrained within us. But it is not the natural state of our mind. In fact, our mind has the potential for great compassion and great wisdom. But right now it's as if we're in the grip of a neurotic view and a neurotic emotion. One that thinks the way to happiness is through grasping at self and clinging to and cherishing self, which, of course, immediately opposes us to others. So our way of being in the world, our way of relating to the world, is a poisonous way. And the mind training teachings, if we apply them, they kind of liberate us from that poison and transform ordinary self-clinging, self-cherishing mind into what we call bodhisattva, meaning the enlightenment mind. The mind which is free from self-centeredness and therefore capable of responding to others with unrestricted love and compassion, which is moreover free from the distorting effects of self-centeredness, which makes us misperceive the world. It's free of that, so we can actually see the world as it truly is. And that, seeing the world as it truly is, we call wisdom. So, bodhisattva, enlightenment mind, is none other than the fusion of compassion and wisdom, which is achievable by all of us, and which will lead to Buddhahood, will lead to full enlightenment itself. And where we start on it is in our ordinary emotions, in our ordinary perceptions. We transform them by using the mind training teachings. So the mind training teachings, the Lojong teachings, are both radical in that they will lead to this amazing transformation in our being, but also immensely practical, because they start with us. We start with them. If you want to ask the question, what do I need to start with the Lojong? The answer would be, just your normal neurotic mind. That's it. That's all we need to bring to this. That we don't need any other great qualification, any great learning, any great skills, any great meditation power even. Our habits of self-clinging and self-cherishing, in short, a neurotic way of relating to the world. That's what we bring to it, to bring to this practice, and we find a way of transforming it. So the mind training teaching, in a way, is for total beginners and for great experienced, learned practitioners. In a sense, it's for everybody. So the mind training, or the Lojong, was circulated among great Mahayana teachers in India, and then it was brought to Tibet primarily by the 11th century Bengali master called Atisha Dipangara Shijanana in his full name, but Atisha for short. And he spread it among his disciples in Tibet, disciples who call themselves the Kadampa, those bound by the word of the Buddha. Atisha himself wrote very little about the mind training, so the texts we have are really texts that his disciples or his disciples' disciples wrote down to preserve Atisha's oral teaching. And this particular text that we're going to study, the 8 verses, is an example of that. So it was written down in the 11th century by a master called Langri Thangpa, Geshe Langri Thangpa, the spiritual friend from Langtang, place in central Tibet. And then, shortly after that, an commentary on it, an expository commentary on it, was written by another early Kadampa master called Geshe Chekhawa. And so, how we usually approach this is that actually we memorize the 8 verses of the root text of Geshe Langri Thangpa. In fact, we can even recite them every day to ourselves. But the essential meaning and how to apply them, we acquire through hearing the commentary. So I'm going to teach the 8 verses through the medium of Geshe Chekhawa's commentary. So now let's make a proper start on this. So at the beginning of the commentary, Geshe Chekhawa simply, as is kind of customary at the beginning of the text, he pays homage. I pay homage to the sublime teachers, meaning his own masters, and we, the later generation of disciples, reading this, in reading it, we think also, well, yes, my receipt of the teaching depend upon all these efforts to practice this teaching and teach it and preserve it by the generations of practitioners who came before me. So I'm, as it were, the student of all these great masters in receiving this teaching. So now, the first verse in the root text says this: with the wish to achieve the highest aim, I shall train myself at all times to cherish sentient beings as supreme, who surpass even a wish-fulfilling gem. So, with the wish to achieve the highest aim of sentient beings, I'm going to retranslate it, I think the order's not quite right there. With the wish to achieve the highest aim of sentient beings, who surpass even a wish-fulfilling gem, I shall train myself at all times to cherish them as supreme. So, what is the meaning of this kind of verse of, as it were, self-remembering? It's like the verse is like an aspiration which Langri Thangpa is making, a commitment to develop this perception. So, perception of all sentient beings as supreme, because they're even greater than a wish-fulfilling gem. So what does all this really mean? Geshe Chekhawa says, in general, in order to train yourself to view each sentient being as a wish-fulfilling gem, and therefore come to regard them as supreme, you should recall 2 important points of similarity shared by sentient beings in the precious gem. So, how a sentient being is like a precious wish-fulfilling gem, and what is a wish-fulfilling gem? Well, a wish-fulfilling gem is, of course, an item from mythology. It's a jewel which simply, if you have it in your possession and you request it to grant you any wishes, it will do so. It's like Aladdin's lamp or something like that. So we're not concerned here with, where do you buy such a thing, or do they really exist anymore? It's just an analogy. It's something that grants you all wishes. So how are sentient beings like that? How can sentient beings grant you all your wishes? We, from our habitual point of view right now, don't have that perception of others. We sometimes think others are useful to us if we could gain security from them, or if we could possess them and use them for our satisfaction. But other sentient beings, we definitely don't think are sentient, wish-fulfilling gems. We think they're horrible, and we wish they wouldn't be there. And the vast majority of people we couldn't care less about. So that's our, as it were, our to-go opinion, to begin with, that's our opinion. Now we're being asked to do something amazing, which is to transform that rather base and gross view of beings into seeing them as amazingly precious, so precious that they are like supreme. We regard them as supreme because they're like a wish-fulfilling gem. So how are they like a wish-fulfilling gem? So here's the way the analogy works. Geshe Chekhawa says, firstly, if you wash the wish-fulfilling gem if you put it into the muddy water, it just is muddy. The jewel can't cleanse itself of the mud. However, on the other, so that's like how we see sentient beings now. They're just covered with mud. We have a very low base view of them. But if you wash that gem with scented water, so cleanse the mud from it, and then put it on top of a banner and make offerings to it. So this is the ritual of requesting from a wish-fulfilling gem. So if you put it on a banner, you make offerings to it, and request what you want, the gem can be the source of all your worldly wishes. It can fulfill all your worldly aspirations. Something which was ugly and insignificant, if you strip away that which makes it appear ugly, the mud, and regard it as you properly should, it will grant all your wishes. So that's the analogy. In the same way, sentient beings, right now afflicted with the defects of samsaric existence, like myself, all sentient beings are dominated by the disturbing emotions, and therefore, as a result of the disturbing emotions, they experience all kinds of difficulties. They're afflicted with the various defects of samsara, and they cannot free themselves from the mud of this unenlightened state. Nor can they wash away the sufferings they experience, nor the causes of their sufferings, which is self-clinging. So, in a way, sentient beings are helpless. They're stuck in the mud of their habitual perceptions, their disturbing emotions, and afflicted by all kinds of difficulties because of their self-clingings. However, in fact, all benefits, both temporary benefits and ultimate benefits, can come from those seemingly low sentient beings. They may look low, they may seem insignificant, but they can cause both temporary happiness and the ultimate happiness of Buddhahood. How so? They don't seem like that to me. They seem insignificant or even low. The reason is because without sentient beings, how would you obtain even temporary benefits, let alone the ultimate happiness? Because, why? Because the only thing that will cause us to break out of what traps us in suffering is by coming to develop love and compassion for others. So, in fact, happiness even in this life comes whenever I forget about myself and care for another person. They evoke in me the response of love and compassion, and that brings about real happiness. And as for Buddhahood, which is the stripping away of every single trace of selfishness in my mind, that of course can only arise because I dedicate myself to working for others. So, in fact, as Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva, Buddhahood depends upon sentient beings. One might think, oh, how wonderful, the Buddha helps sentient beings. But equally it's true to say, the sentient beings help you become a Buddha. Without there being suffering sentient beings to evoke in you this enlargement of your capacity to feel, an enlargement that takes you away from the narrowness of your self-obsession, you never break away from that prison. Sentient beings and their difficulty and their problems, they cause us to break out of our of our prison. So they are truly like a wish-fulfilling gem. And therefore I should begin my path, my spiritual path, by this acknowledgement and this determination to treat sentient beings as supreme. See how wonderful that is. One could enter the Mahayana thinking, oh, I'm going to do so much for other beings, and secretly therefore develop the conceit of how kind I am to sentient beings and how important I am for sentient beings. In fact, one might even be tempted to think they don't know how lucky they are that I'm here. They really don't know. And by the way, they don't appreciate me either. So in that way, one is ostensibly travelling in the Mahayana, but inside one's emotions are poisonous. But beginning with this sense of, actually it's others who help me, then my Mahayana path will be authentic. So that is the starting place. And it's a story that many of you heard many times, but one can recall the very episode that is said to have set Buddha off on the journey to, because he wasn't called Buddha then, set Buddha off on the journey to enlightenment, was that experience he had in the hells, where he's gone out as a result of his very, very self-centered, very aggressive actions. He's finally ended up in hell, and then he sees another being who is suffering there, and he volunteers to take that suffering person's place in the hallucinatory sufferings of hell. In other words, for one moment he enlarges his feelings to think about, that other person's going to experience that terrible suffering. Why don't I take it away from him? Why don't I have it rather than him? And that was the beginning of Buddha's upward journey. So really, you see, Buddha has that person to thank. That person who prompted in him that radical break from self-centeredness. So that's how we should regard other beings. They are all like wish-fulfilling gems. So we cherish them as supreme. That's the first point. Now the second verse is like, we could say, we've begun with the right intention, this wholesome intention of focusing upon others with this sense of their preciousness. But how do we sustain that sense? How do we prevent it from being overcome by the flooding back of our normal habitual way of looking at others, which is they are inferior to me because I'm the most important person. In my universe, I am the most important person, and others really are of little account. In other words, the habit of pride, one of the 6 major disturbing emotions, is incredibly strong in us. So we have to, that little space we've created by thinking of others with gratitude and concern for the view of their preciousness, we need to keep it alive to stop it being strangled by pride. So in the root verse it says, whenever I meet with others, I should view myself as inferior to all, and should train myself to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. Whenever I meet with others, I should view myself as inferior to all, and will train myself to hold others superior from the depths of my heart. Now, all Dharma teaching is in a way is a remedy to specific poisons, to specific unhealthy emotions. Here the unhealthy emotion is pride. And pride, of course, is that feeling of being superior in one way or another to others. Now, if, for instance, one had a very low view of oneself, if one had a very depressed mind and habitually felt oneself was very inferior to others, then this teaching would need to be very skillfully applied. So, in fact, for such a person, teachings that, as Atisha says, praise the sublime nature of the mind are very important. It was to get, otherwise, this person out of this unhealthy self-contempt, self-despising state. So, like teachings on the Buddha nature, and therefore to come this person to overcome their self-hatred and self-contempt with a sense of their great possibility for compassion and wisdom. So that teaching would be most appropriate. But for the rest of us who don't have that particular affliction, for us pride is a great danger. It will strangle our good intentions. So here's how we train in it in everyday life. So Geshe Chekhawa says now, to expand on this, as stated here, wherever we are and whoever we meet, we should train to view ourselves in all possible ways as lower and to respect others from the depths of our heart. Others, what does others mean here? Others means everybody. Those who are higher than us in rank, so like in social rank in some way, such as, for instance, our teachers, well, it's even our school teachers, in fact, not just Dharma teachers, but school teachers, or your abbot if you're a monk or a nun. Whoever's higher than you, you should train with them. Those who are equal to you, such as your fellow Dharma practitioners or fellow students, and those who are inferior to us, so like in temporary social rank, such as beggars or something like that. So you train impartially in this way, trying to overcome pride in relation to any class of person. And in every way you train means that whether your pride is based upon your family lineage or your intelligence or whatever factors, whatever things you're concentrated on as your source of pride, a source of superiority, you have to root it out. You have to overcome it. As he says, we should reflect upon our shortcomings in relation to these factors and avoid becoming proud. So, for instance, some of us might think, as Geshe Chekhawa says, some people are lower class. For instance, they may have a job that is kind of lower class, and then we feel proud on the basis of that. But others may think, I'm so good because my intelligence is so great. Actually, he says, for the first, if you think you're superior because of your class, Geshe Chekhawa, talking to his fellow Tibetans, says, you can't be proud because of your physical appearance or your class. Just look at yourself. It's ridiculous to do that. So we also should feel there's nothing about us that makes us so special. And then, if we think we're superior because we're intelligent, we should actually examine ourselves and realize how little we really know. I'm not learned in any way compared to the truly learned. And as for my behavior, if I thinking, oh, I'm so good because I'm a Dharma practitioner, or I'm a nun or a monk or so on, I should remember, actually there's almost no negative action that I haven't done. Outwardly I look good because of my status as a Dharma person or something like that, but inwardly I'm full of all kinds of poisons. As Geshe Langri says, even at this very moment, my thoughts embody the 3 poisons. And in fact, most of my words and most of my actions are actually really impure. So whatever my temporary status now, outwardly, in the future it would be difficult even to obtain a good human birth because I'm so full of negativity in reality. So why should I be? What is there for me to be proud about in these ways? Whether it's my class, whether it's my intelligence, whether it's my status, there's nothing there. Shantideva says about the dangers of pride, by this type of behavior, proud behaviorness, even the human form will not be obtained. And if I fail to achieve human existence, there will only be suffering and no virtue. So Geshe Langri says, in this manner we should contemplate all our faults and reflect that there's nothing, it's a Tibetan saying I guess, or a saying from central Tibet, nothing is underneath me but the river. You know, as I'm so low, really, when I add myself up and add up all my faults, there's nothing that's lower than me except the bed of the river. And in this way, diminish our conceit and learn to respect others. So that to respect others, we should try to notice as much as possible the positive qualities in others, how they possess intelligence or beautiful appearance or whatever their Dharma practice, the qualities of their Dharma practice is. We should try to notice these and think how wonderful they possess these qualities. If when we look at them at the first glance we don't see these qualities, we should think, oh, they really do have them, but just I cannot see them right now. So try to always see the good qualities in others. And like I say, if you don't notice them right away, think it's just my perceptions are not deep enough. They really have hidden qualities. Why should you do that? Because you have an imbalance. Our way of looking at the world is always putting other people down and elevating ourselves. So in fact, we have to correct that. And just as if one end of is down, one end is up, you sit on the other end to make a balance. So you do this with your pride, your habitual pride. If, for instance, you're proud of your learning, you should specifically pay attention to how learned other people are, and so that you cease to elevate yourself above them. Now, one might say, but is it true that people are better than me? Well, actually no. From the point of view of emptiness, there's no intrinsic nature in anybody. So nobody's intrinsically better and nobody's intrinsically lower. We could say equally, all beings possess the Buddha nature. So nobody's higher, nobody's lower. But we have we have an imbalance at the moment. And so firstly we have to correct that. So concentrating on the good qualities of others is to correct our habit of concentrating on the defects of others. Because look, one way we reinforce our sense of superiority is always seeking out what is bad about other people. How other people fail, how other people weak, how other people are not living up to their commitments. We enjoy such stories because it makes us feel superior. So we correct that by this deliberately chosen remedy of looking for the good in other beings. It's not so it is a temporary remedy. But I think for most of us, this is a temporary remedy we need to persist with for quite some time. In other words, a quick 5-minute, I'll find the qualities in others and then go back to normal. Well, probably not do. So, and Geshe Chekhawa continues, when it says in the root verse, I'll hold others superior from the depths of my heart, this means that, of course, that we shouldn't just give lip service to it. It should be not just in our mouth as mere words, as Geshe Chekhawa says. Instead, if we truly have the intention in our heart, I'll regard all beings as my family, without discriminating on the basis of their family background, then Chenrezig will compliment us. Chenrezig, the embodiment of compassion, will say, you're a child of a noble family. This is excellent. So that is like the way to overcome pride in one's family or one's race or whatever is this beautiful way. All beings are my family. And then it's like, to signify how powerful this is, Chenrezig will be pleased with you. And as Chenrezig is the embodiment of compassion, it's like a witness to you having developed some compassion by this, including all sentient beings as your family. So that would be like one way we could know that this practice has worked, that you regard all beings as your family. Just as when the earth is leveled, oceans form upon it. In the same way, when you've leveled your pride in your heart is like a level surface, and then all the qualities of enlightenment can arise upon it. But first you have to flatten out. Get rid of the mountains of pride, and then the qualities can really arise. So, in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, Buddha summed it up as, in this way, live as if you are a servant of all beings. Live as if you are the servant of all beings. And later on, Geshe Langri Thangpa himself said that there's the one precept that one should keep, that one should maintain most seriously is all sentient beings are the masters. I am the servant of sentient beings. So dwell as if you're a servant of all beings. It doesn't mean you're a doormat. It doesn't mean you allow beings to abuse you. Because a servant of all beings is somebody who wants the good for all, wants others to achieve happiness, and will do everything possible to create the circumstances for this. So, for instance, if somebody is acting abusively to you, with love and compassion, you should skillfully try to prevent this happening. If you do not do that, in a way you're cooperating with the destruction of this person, because the more they persist in their negative behavior, the more suffering they amass for themselves. But that way of resisting such thing must always come out of a heart of loving kindness and compassion. So it won't be aggressive, it won't be retaliatory. It will be skillful, because one's mind is not full of aggression and retaliation. Oftentimes one will find a very skillful way to deal with this situation. Sometimes it won't be apparent immediately, but gradually in the longer run it will become apparent. So we can truly be a servant of all sentient beings in this way. So there's nothing like should we say, cowardly or submissive in this attitude. One might confuse it with that, but it is not like that at all, because one is in fact actually developing great heroism and bravery in wishing to be the servant of all sentient beings. So Geshe Chekhawa says, in essence, all the scriptures, the scriptures that contain the record of Buddha's teachings, the three scriptural collections, the sutras, the Vinaya, the Abhidhamma, are just a means to overcome pride. When we are proud, we're unable to live in harmony with others, even in this present life. Obviously, pride opposes us to others. Everybody else is our rival, our competitor. Even those who are close to you, you make them into your enemy out of your pride. Like Sakya Pandita says, a snake may have a jewel on its forehead, but who would live near the snake despite the benefits of the jewel? If you could have the jewel, nobody will live with that snake, because it will bite them, it will poison them, it will kill them. Similarly, with proud people, they may have qualities, in fact, those proud people, but they're just impossible to be with. So you can never be in harmony with other people if you have pride. As I say, everybody is an enemy, everybody's a competitor. So pride doesn't lead to happiness in this life. And as for the future lives, we've already heard, but again, Geshe Chekhawa will quote Shantideva. Some ignorant beings, owing to the force of their pride, even take birth in the lower realms or in forms of human birth without any freedom to practice the Dharma. They become blind and weak, or possessed of an ugly attitude as a result of pride. So it ruins this present life, but also stores up many problems for the next, we could say. And Geshe Chekhawa continues, because of pride, the disturbing emotions become even stronger. How does that happen? Well, first of all, pride prevents you ever examining yourself in a sober and realistic way. Pride prevents you from checking what is the state of your mind. You simply assume my mind is perfect. There's no need, how can I improve it? How can perfection be improved upon? Not possible to do that. Whereas if one had a more realistic sense of oneself, one would examine and see, well, there are disturbing emotions that I have. I have bad habits in my way of relating to the world. But pride prevents you from doing that. So your disturbing emotions are unchecked. And of course, disturbing emotions, like anything else, proliferate if not checked. So your disturbing emotions grow worse and worse. And of course, particularly, they grow worse and worse in relation to all those beings you regard as inferior to yourself, because they're contemptible, deplorable, low people who you don't need to have any concern for. So you become worse, you degenerate if you don't check your pride. And above all, of course, there's no chance of enlightenment. You're actually going if enlightenment is one direction, because of pride, you're going in the other. And this is the same, therefore, whether we are non-Buddhist or Buddhist. We may be a Buddhist, we may be seemingly learning the Dharma or doing the Dharma things, but if our mind is full of pride, we're going further away from enlightenment every week, every year. So just being ostensibly a Dharma person is useless if we haven't begun to tackle our pride. As it says again in the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the bodhisattva who is proud, meaning the fall of Mahayana, the bodhisattva who is proud remains far away from enlightenment. See, that is our ego is so brilliant, such a resourceful, strategic thinker, that it finds in Dharma the things to feed itself, in particular to feed its conceit, its pride, and so therefore it's like even more vital that we who want to sincerely practice the Dharma, want to really change ourselves and overcome ego clinging, we have to be ever alert for pride, because merely entering into Buddhism is, you don't leave pride behind. Pride will re-emerge, but this time, as I say, with different things to be proud about, and in a way even more clever. Pride can disguise itself even more cleverly. We can all see in the world examples of people who are very materialistic, so-called, and brash and proud of their this, that, and the other. But can we spot in ourselves our soft-spoken Dharma pride, our gentle, spiritual seeming pride? That is what we have to ask ourselves. So anyway, Geshe Chekhawa says, so all the states of inferiority, degeneration and suffering within samsara arise from grasping at ourselves as most precious. In contrast, all the joys, both in this life and in enlightenment itself, originate from sentient beings. So there's nothing to be, it's like, I didn't make myself enlightened, I didn't make myself compassionate or wise. I should think, as it comes from others. As Geshe Chekhawa says, we should therefore perceive all sentient beings as embodiments of higher qualities and vanquish our pride. So that is the second of the 8 mind trainings. Now the third one is how to train so that we eliminate the disturbing emotions in their very arising. So the third root verse, Geshe Langri Thangpa said, during all activities I will examine my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, which endangers myself and others, I will train myself to meet it directly and turn it away. During all my activities, I will examine my mind. As soon as a disturbing emotion arises that endangers myself and others, I will train myself to meet it directly and turn it away. So, we saw pride, we looked at pride, this very dangerous, disturbing emotion, dangerous for spiritual practitioners. So now we consider all the disturbing emotions which could destroy our good intention, the good intention that we started with, of working for the benefit of others. So this verse really concerns the necessity for mindfulness and clear comprehension, as we call it, the two great qualities of mindfulness and clear comprehension. So Geshe Chekhawa explains it in this way. Training ourselves to examine our mind in all activities and turning away the disturbing emotions as soon as they arise should be done in this following way. See, because why do we need to do this? Well, if one asks, well, how do disturbing emotions arise? In fact, disturbing emotions don't arise from something outside of ourselves. They don't even arise from the objects which we think are to blame for disturbing emotions. The disturbing emotions arise from the mind itself. So we might think, if I just removed all the objects from that world which provoke disturbing emotions, there wouldn't be any disturbing emotions. But we couldn't do that. We couldn't change the external world in such a total way. And besides, the real root of the disturbing emotions is coming from the mind, not from the objects themselves. That's why in the Abhidharma it says, if one analyzes the cause and conditions through which disturbing emotions, whether it's hatred or desire, whatever it is, arise, they're threefold. One is the external condition, sure, the object. But second, the other two things are from the habit, the imprint of past disturbing emotions, which is in our mind, and, most subtle of all, our general incorrect perception of the world. The incorrect perception that makes us think in dualistic terms of subject, object, self and other, I and other. Those two things arise in the mind, the dualistic perception and the bad habit that I've cultivated of desire, of hatred, of jealousy and so on from beginningless time. So I have to capture the disturbing emotion as it arises in the mind. There I have to cut it off. Because I cannot just eliminate everything disturbing from the world. So that is why the real remedy is mindfulness and clear comprehension. As I need to create the awareness that spots the disturbing emotion as it's beginning to arise as a wave of energy in the mind itself. So, to be able to spot the wave of energy arising, I need to slow down and begin to pay attention. So I need to train in mindfulness and clear comprehension. Geshe Chekhawa says this: whatever you're doing, like sitting, walking, standing, lying, whatever you're doing in everyday life, try and bring mindfulness and clear comprehension to it. Mindfulness, Jampa in Tibetan, or Smriti in Sanskrit, means like recollecting, bringing the mind back and to this moment, to this present moment. When mind is wandering, bring it back to here. And clear comprehension, the ally, the mental factor that is allied with mindfulness, is like knowing what is happening around. So one is alert to what is in one's immediate environment, both emotionally inside and externally. So with mindfulness and clear comprehension, analyze whatever is arising in our mind, such as attachment. Look at it with this thought: I will let them go, or let go of this disturbing emotion the immediate they arise. So in this way we level them by simply noticing them, as Geshe Chekhawa says, by observing in this way. Because our problem is we don't notice them until they've already captured our mind and prompted in us a whole chain of emotional reactions leading even to actions. But in this way, if we post mindfulness as a kind of attention, paying attention to our mind in this present moment, then when the tendency of a disturbing emotion begins to crest, the energy begins to rise, we notice it and can drop it. We can let it go. So that is why disturbing emotion is so important in this way. But on the other hand, if, as Geshe Chekhawa says, if we procrastinate, we don't pay attention to what is happening in our mind, then he says it's like an elderly couple who they hear some noises in their house. It's actually a thief, but they don't bother to go and look who it is, so that then they get everything, they lose everything. So we need this alertness, this attentiveness to our mind. Because if we don't have it, then the disturbing emotions will grow, they'll proliferate in our mind, and they'll grow stronger and stronger. You see, the thing is, it's like the disturbing emotions aren't a steady state. It's not like, one could say, I've got a manageable amount of disturbing emotions, so like a little bit of inflation is okay, as they say. I believe economists say that. And so I've got a tolerable amount of disturbing emotions. The only trouble is that the tolerable is they grow. Like rust never sleeps, so the disturbing emotions always proliferate. So we can't, as it were, live comfortably with them. So we need to have mindfulness. As Geshe Langri says, the habits of disturbing emotion grow stronger until they become really intense. And that therefore leads finally to great suffering. So the consequence of allowing them to fester in one's mind is disastrous. They become more, the habit of the disturbing emotions becomes greater and greater. One might see this because, you see, in a way, the disturbing emotions, they want more fuel all the time. So, like, you could see this, for instance, in aggression. If you have aggression, it's like, okay, it feels satisfying to direct it against an awful person for a while, but it's not enough. Later, your aggression needs, I found some more awful people to hate. And so it's bigger. And then, I found some more. And in this way, what study maybe thought it was justifiable to dislike that first person. You find by the end you hate almost the entire world. Because this emotion of hatred grows. And we know, of course, it's the same with desire. Like, as Geshe Langri says in the 37 practices of all Buddha's children, like drinking salt water and so on. So the disturbing emotions are never tolerable in that way. So we have to try to let them go. And to let them go, we need attentiveness, we need mindfulness. As Geshe Langri says, if we can let go the disturbing emotions when they arise, their imprints will become lighter. So it's like, when you see the disturbing emotion arising in your mind, maybe it's a habitual one like desire or anger or something, if you notice it and can let it go, it hasn't eliminated the imprint behind that disturbing emotion entirely, but it's weakened it. So the next time the disturbing emotion arises, it's not quite so compelling. Your mind is not so quickly drawn into it. Your mind is not so quickly swallowed up by it. So it's, in this way, it's like you're beginning to get ahead. You're beginning to succeed in freeing yourself from the compulsion of the disturbing emotions every time you let go of one as it arises. So as Geshe Langri says, in this way, you could see the workings of the law of karma, the law of cause and effect. So you will definitely experience the benefit of letting go of the disturbing emotions in your future experience. And of course, on the contrary side, you definitely experience the defects of not letting go of your disturbing emotions in your future experience. So in this way, we have to see the disturbing emotions as a kind of enemy. Now one might say, but surely from a very profound point of view, everything is emptiness. So the disturbing emotions are empty. So they're not my enemy. Yes, if you have that depth of wisdom, that is absolutely true. But as a beginner right now, like ourselves, for most of us, we do need to consider there is something to be done. And we need to develop mindfulness to overcome the disturbing emotions. So that way, they're like a kind of enemy. Sure, finally we'll realize it's a non-existent enemy, but to all intents and purposes, practically right now, it's an enemy. And just to bring this home to us, Shantideva points out, I may be slain or burned alive, I may be decapitated, but under no circumstances should I bow down before my enemy, the disturbing emotions. And Geshe Thakur unpacks that rather dramatic verse for us. The point is here, that a conventional enemy can harm us in this world, but it stops at the end of this life. At the very most it will last till then. But the enemy, the disturbing emotions, they're a much worse enemy, the one in our mind, because this will damage us for the future. Because the effect of the disturbing emotions and the impulse of these emotions goes with the unliberated mind and creates the pattern of the future. So, your physical enemy can't go with you, but this one can. And again, just to bring home to us how who the real enemy is, he quotes in Shantideva, this enemy of mine, the disturbing emotions, is long-lived, seemingly with neither beginning nor end. That's, of course, not ultimately true. The disturbing emotions, as Shantideva will tell us, does have an end. But certainly they're beginningless, in the sense that samsara is beginningless. So, compared to other enemies, no other enemies can last as long as my disturbing emotions. So, it's almost like you talk about enemies, but no enemies you have in this world are anything like the disturbing emotions. They're the one who have caused all this trouble, this suffering for you, and they didn't just spring up in this life. They've been there as long as your mind, and that is beginning this time. And again, another way in which the disturbing emotions are a much worse enemy than ordinary enemies. Geshe Thakur says, furthermore, when we concede to our conventional enemies, they no longer harm us and may actually benefit us. So, you make a peace treaty with your enemies, and that's that. But if you make a peace treaty with your disturbing emotions, okay, disturbing emotions, you can stay with me. I'm at peace with you. They become even more destructive, as we saw. They crowd out everything else. They crowd out all the good intentions and emotions you might have, and deliver you to greater suffering. So you can't make a peace treaty with the disturbing emotions. Again, he quotes Shantideva on this. If you relate to your enemies with friendship and gifts, this bring benefit and happiness. It's like, well, generally speaking, the world that's true. But then again, as Kipling said, if you pay the Dane, he's only going to come back and want more. But the Danes are asking for much nowadays, so it must have worked finally. Anyway, so you can deal with external enemies, but if you appease the disturbing emotions, you give something to them, you let them stay around, it causes even more suffering and injury. And then again, ordinary worldly enemies, at the most they harm our body, our life and wealth. But the disturbing emotions create immeasurable suffering as long as we're in samsara. So he quotes Shantideva once more. If all the gods and asuras were to rise up against me as my enemies, they could not drag me and cast me into the blazing fire of hell. Yet this enemy, my disturbing emotions, can fling me there immediately, where even the mountains themselves will be destroyed. So we might think that the worldly gods and the anti-gods, the asuras, have power, but they don't take you to hell. They can't make you go there against your wishes. So what takes us to hell? Our hatred. Our hatred does that. This internal enemy of the disturbing emotions, specifically hatred, takes us to hell. So in that case, who is the more powerful over me? The gods or the disturbing emotions? And the answer, of course, is the disturbing emotions. So Geshe Chekhawa concludes this long series of quotations by saying, so we should in this way view the disturbing emotions as our enemy and discard them. So it's like Geshe Chekhawa and Geshe Langri Thangpa are asking us to get serious and to be sober and realistic in our estimation of where we're at right now. It's a characteristic of the Lojong teaching that it is very blunt and very kind of plain speaking. That's why actually many of the texts and commentaries, even in Tibetan, are in very kind of not scholarly Tibetan, not the poetic or scholarly Tibetan of the great treatises, but a very kind of earthy language. And I think it's we need to get that over in English too. That it's like very much, well, this is the way it is. This is the way you are. This is the way you are right now. These are the difficulties and these are the problems. It's not fancied up in any way. It's not put in a very elevated way, so that we can be in no doubt about what is the situation, what are the causes of problems, and what needs to be done about them. So, therefore, right now, practically speaking, our disturbing emotions are our problem, our enemy. So we have to know that in order to want to let them go. But the good thing is, so now the good thing that's different about the disturbing emotions is this. Ordinary enemies, even if you could kick them out, they can return and cause problems to you. But if you dissolve the disturbing emotions by recognizing their nature as emptiness, recognize the nature of your mind, they have no place to come. They will never return. So once you've exterminated the seeds of the disturbing emotions, they cannot return. They're like burnt seeds that cannot germinate any fruit any longer. So that is the good thing. And you can do it yourself. That is also a good thing. This is an enemy that you can overcome yourself by determining to do so and applying the right remedy. As he says, the method for eliminating them is through training in conduct and meditation and view. Conduct, meditation and view. The meaning of this threefold training is this. Beginners need some support in their behavior. They don't have, as it were, the strength of mind just to rely on meditation and correct understanding to overcome the disturbing emotions. It's like our behavior needs to calm down first of all. Our behavior needs to come in line with the values of the Dharma. And that's the point of taking vows. Like the vow not to harm beings and so on and so forth. These vows create a space in your life where meditation can then begin to be effective. But if you don't change your behavior, simply thinking you can overcome your problems by meditation is very unlikely to work. So your behavior you have to become softer and more gentle in your behavior. And the training given by Lord Buddha on moral conduct is exactly for that. And then with that in place, meditation means, in this sense, meditation means using the particular meditation remedy to whatever is the dominant disturbing emotion. So, for instance, for those who are afflicted by anger as the dominant disturbing emotion, to put some emphasis onto loving kindness meditation would be very helpful. For those who are dominated by pride, meditating on the equalness of oneself and others would be very helpful. For those who are afflicted by desire, meditating on the compounded nature of things would be very helpful. So these are all remedy meditations that, as it were, soften the habit of the disturbing emotion in your mind. And then finally, the deepest of all remedies is simply recognizing the emptiness. This is what is meant by the view. Simply recognizing the emptiness of both the objects and the disturbing emotions themselves. They actually are fundamentally without any essence, without any solidity. But to have that strength of clarity, to see that, depends upon our mind already being quite focused through meditation. And for our mind to be focused, we need to have the proper conduct. So that is why there's a sequence to this training. Moral conduct, meditation, and then wisdom. So that is the training on mindfulness and clear comprehension. So the fourth mind training, Geshe Chekhawa says, is training to regard beings of unpleasant character, or beings who are oppressed by negative karma, or beings who are oppressed by suffering, regarding all these types of people with special care, because they're very precious. So this is going to be the fourth mind training now. So, in the root verse, Geshe Langri Thangpa says, when I meet beings of unpleasant character, and those oppressed by intense negative karma and suffering, as though I found a treasure of precious jewels, I will train myself to cherish them, for they're so rarely found. So, we trained in regarding others as supreme, but then we found immediately that there are difficulties in keeping this aspiration. First of all, coming from our own habit of pride. And then we notice that there's the habitual arising of disturbing emotions, which I need to develop mindfulness of, to stop being carried away by the flood of disturbing emotions. Now we encounter the situation where there's something that would, as it were, break my good aspiration. A situation which is very challenging, very seemingly like, how can I preserve my good-mindedness, my good-heartedness with such a difficult situation? It's like I can be good-hearted up to a certain point. I can try to preserve kindness and love up to a certain point, but there are some situations, some beings, some people where it's just too much. I cannot go there. I cannot extend that far. But the trouble is that then you don't have bodhicitta. Because if you can only preserve good-heartedness to some people and not to others, then you're no different from you were to begin with. Because we all like some people and don't like others. That's what we're like as ordinary worldly beings. So how are we different? if there's a boundary beyond which we won't go, if there's a line that we draw and say, beyond this, I cannot stretch my good-heartedness, my capacity for love and compassion. Yet at the same time, for karmic reasons, there'll definitely be situations that we meet where we're challenged, where our bodhicitta aspiration is challenged. So we need a skillful means for, as it were, extending that boundary, for including them, these difficult beings, these difficult situations, in our practice. We need a way to see it differently, to see it not as a break, not as a boundary, not as a limit, but as something actually that's even helpful to my practice, something that's precious to my practice. Like we need a way to unlock the potential good in this difficult, challenging situation. And so here's how we do it, according to Geshe Langri Thangpa and Geshe Chekhawa's commentary. So first, Geshe Chekhawa just wants to define, a little bit more, what are these challenging situations that Geshe Langri Thangpa is referring to. So beings of unpleasant character refers to those like the Kinga Sangha, not to be confused with the great mind-only Mahayana master, but this is the Kinga Sangha, who I think is the king in one of the Jataka stories of the Buddha's previous lives. I think this is the king who, when Buddha was a meditator in the wilderness, I think this is the king who, just out of sheer malice, tortured him and cut off all his limbs. But the bodhisattva reacted with amazing patience to this. I think this is who Kinga Sangha is. But a thoroughly bad lot. Yeah. So that's an example of being of unpleasant character, who, not having accumulated merit in the past, experiences the arising of afflictions without even a trace of control. So it's somebody who just doesn't make any effort to control their own evil impulses, their own selfish impulses. And also, it could therefore, Chekhawa says, it could refer to beings such as, in the following story, there's a very bad-tempered person who was crossing a mountain pass, so obviously quite an arduous undertaking, and there he was lucky enough to meet some people who gave him some food to eat, gave him some meat stew, but because the food was quite hot, it burnt his lips. So this man was so ungrateful that he threw the plate away and accused them of burning him. So here's another person who's a thoroughly bad character. Somebody saves his life, but he's ungrateful for a tiny discomfort that he has. So these are examples, Kinga Sangha and this guy are examples of beings with thoroughly unpleasant character, which has come about through their never controlling their habits. And somebody with negative karma, somebody who's oppressed by their negative karma, is somebody who's committed very negative actions, like they've broken their vows, or stolen the stolen the offerings made to the 3 jewels, or attacked Buddhas, or killed their parents. These are people who have got now suffering the ripening of very, very intense negative actions. And the third set of people referred to, those oppressed by suffering, are those who are oppressed by such sufferings now as serious illnesses, or like leprosy, or some other plague like that. So these are people one would hesitate to extend kindness and compassion towards, because they're either bad character, or because their negative karma repels us, or we're frightened of their suffering. In the third case, we're frightened of their suffering. So in every case, we have to find a way to overcome our resistance to helping them. So Geshe Chekhawa says, we should not treat them as enemies, saying, I cannot bear to look at them, and I cannot allow them to come near me. We must not do that. Rather, we should feel compassion towards them, as though they were beings who'd been condemned by the king's executioners. Because in a way, like in the first two cases, in the first case, the person of unpleasant character, one should consider what is up ahead for such a person. He or she is going to definitely have very terrible suffering as a result of not being able to control their disturbing emotions. Even if some among them, like the ones who've broken their vows, or done such very negative things to their parents or something, even if some of them have broken their vows, we should feel, what can I do to help them? They've broken their vows. That's a matter of great consequence that will lead to really big problems for them. So instead of shunning them, fearing like to be contaminated by them or something, we should think, what can I do to help them? And the same with those who are suffering, suffering from some disease or something. We should ask ourselves immediately, what can I do to help? As Geshe Chekhawa says, we should ask, what can I do to help them? One must ask oneself that, until our tears flow freely, as we feel the real engagement with their plight, with their difficulties. And practically speaking, he says, this means that we should first of all console them with words. We should extend our sympathy with words. And we should then provide for their material needs. If we can, to the extent we can, we should provide for what they need. And if they have a sickness, help them to find a cure for their sickness. But if this doesn't work, that we cannot find a cure for their immediate plight, we should sustain them in our thoughts, not turn away from them, think, oh, I tried to do something, but I can't do anything for them, so I'll just ignore them from now on. We should always hold them in our hearts. He says, bear them in our thoughts, and whatever we can do materially, like to give them shelter or something, comfort, we should do that. Some people, he says, Chekhawa says, some people think, well, I can't do anything for them. Their suffering is such and such from their own negative actions, or just through cause and conditions their suffering has arisen. I can't do anything for them, but it could harm me if I try to do something for them. So these people cover their noses and walk away from those oppressed by acute suffering. Actually, Chekhawa says this is kind of completely crazy, because you're not protecting yourself from suffering by walking away from those who are suffering now. The causes of suffering occurring to you can come from your own karma, or from other causes and conditions external to this present situation. So you don't protect yourself in any way by shying away from those who are presently afflicted by suffering. As he says, there is no certainty that you won't suffer from this very same thing at some time in the future. So you're not protecting yourself. Therefore, so stop that self-protective attitude is what Geshe Chekhawa is getting at. You're feeling, oh, I can't go there. I can't stretch my good-heartedness, my involvement with others to such difficult cases. It doesn't work. It doesn't protect you in any way. So you've no need to draw that line and try to wall yourself off from difficult beings or difficult situations. Therefore, in our actions, he says, we should provide others with food, medicine, and the like. So to the extent we can materially benefit those afflicted by difficulties, we should do so. While with our thoughts, we should meditate in the following way to train our mind. So with this kind of pure aspiration, we should think, whatever sufferings beings have, may they ripen in me. So this is the aspiration of exchanging oneself for others. Whatever sufferings they have, may they ripen in me. Like Shantideva says in Bodhisattva Thaye, those who swiftly wish to attain enlightenment for themselves and others should practice this supreme secret of exchanging oneself for others. So to exchange oneself for others is to think, reverse one's normal habitual way of thinking. Normally one thinks, all happiness for me and no suffering for me. All happiness for me and no suffering for me. And as for others, I don't care. But here we subvert this completely by thinking no matter what is afflicted, whatever suffering is afflicting others, I will take it on myself. And conversely, of course, whatever happiness is arising for me, I will give it to others. So as I said, Shantideva calls this like the supreme secret. And sometimes it's called the secret teaching of the Mahayana. Secret in the sense that it's like, well, it should be in the core of one's heart. It should be one's basic attitude to the world, one's basic attitude to what one meets, one's basic attitude to others should be this. May all their sufferings ripen in me, may all my happiness ripen in them. And therefore, if I have that attitude, these beings, with these difficult beings, these suffering beings, these afflicted beings, far from being obstacles to my development of good-heartedness, are the best possible catalysts for it. Because they have so much difficulty. And that is the meaning of the line, I should cherish them, for they're so rarely found. Geshe Chakra explains it in this way. Since it's rare to find a precious gem, we do not discard it, but rather keep it and cherish it. You know, that part of why it's precious is its scarcity, its rarity. So, you know, you don't find a diamond every day, so if you do, you keep it. You don't throw it away, because it has so many worldly benefits for you. So similar with these beings, rather than throwing them away by ignoring them or hiding from them or protecting yourself from them, you have to see how precious they are, as Geshe Chekhawa says. In the same way, beings of unpleasant character are not so easy to find. Yet in dependence upon them, compassion arises. And in dependence upon them, the awakening, the bodhicitta arises. So, somebody who is like so bad, so depraved, who you bump into them, it's not that common. Most people generally, aren't like that. Most people are generally do have some capacity for kindness and will share it with you. But these spectacularly bad, degenerate people, they're not that common. Yet, if you consider them the way it's been explained here, consider them from the point of view of what are they going to suffer as a result of their unpleasant character, your attitude to them completely changes. Because it's like you're seeing them in a year's time. You're seeing them in 10 years' time. You're seeing them in another lifetime, that when their deeds catch up with them, when their unpleasant character produces the great sufferings that are inevitably going to arise for them, you're seeing them in that way and responding to them as a vessel of suffering. And so that has really enlarged your compassion amazingly when you can train with such a person. The limits on your compassion are broken when you can be compassionate to the person of a bad character. And if your compassion can expand in this way, your bodhicitta, your wish to become a Buddha for the sake of all beings, is going to be strengthened. And actually, it's the test, isn't it, of whether you do have bodhicitta or not. So, before you were not sure, before your bodhicitta might have just been sentiment, it has been wishful thinking. But the encounter with this person and your ability to extend your good-heartedness even to this person confirms the genuineness of your bodhicitta. Knocks off all the sentimentality, knocks off from it any of the sense of I'm being nice to them so they'll be nice to me, or I'm being nice because they'll thank me for it. All those kind of subversions of compassion are dismissed when you're extending compassion to this person of thoroughly bad character. Because this person of thoroughly bad character isn't going to be nice to you, isn't going to say thank you kindly for being such a good bodhisattva. They're going to probably despise and hate you. So this is really a real benefit to the authenticity of your practice. So, as it says, in dependence upon them, the bodhicitta arises. So it's rare to find such objects as these that allow us to develop the Mahayana paths. And similarly concerning when we meet people who got a lot of bad karma through breaking vows, and similar goes with those who have suffering. They awaken your heart. They open your heart. So how can they not be precious beings? They are precious beings because they do this to you. They bring about this radical transformation in your heart. So you should view them as so precious. As Geshe Langri says, without making deliberate effort, it's rare to encounter such objects as these three types of being, who allow us to develop the Mahayana path. Why is that? Well, consider it in this way. Compassion does not arise towards the noble ones and those with worldly excellence, so they cannot help develop the bodhicitta. So like, when you consider great noble bodhisattvas on the high bhumis, let alone Buddhas, there's no suffering there that opens your heart, that opens your heart in sympathy and empathy. You don't feel that when you see such beings. So in a way, they don't lead you to, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas don't lead you to Buddhahood, because they don't open your heart. But without your heart being opened in compassion and bodhicitta, there's no Buddhahood. You never will become a Buddha. So, therefore, Geshe Chekhawa quotes this passage from Bodhicitta again. Except for bodhicitta, the Buddhas don't teach any means. That means like there's no other way of becoming a Buddha except for developing bodhicitta. And without sentient beings to train for, there's no bodhicitta. And especially therefore, these beings really are the most powerful for you, because they stretch you the furthest. You see, it's like this, it's easy to feel that one is being compassionate and loving to somebody who is winsome, somebody who is pleasant, and so on. It's easy to feel that one could be loving and compassionate to such a person, but because they make you feel good. But these people are the real deal. These beings are the real deal. You don't get any worldly recompense from them, and it's difficult to be with them. So they stretch you. They overcome your habitual limitations, which I referred to earlier as like saying, I can be loving, kind and compassionate up to this point, but beyond this there's a point that I cannot go. That's the dividing line between real bodhicitta and just sentimentality, just kind of ordinary worldly emotions. So, for that reason, these beings are a central ingredient in the path. So that means we've finished the first 4 of the 8 verses of mind training. But I think now there's really no chance we can finish all 8 verses before 12:30. So perhaps there's time for questions and a little meditation. Mm-hmm.
Mark, I don't really understand why it would be hard to find compassion being so sick.
We're frightened of it. We're very frightened of sickness. That we kind of shy away from it. It takes a lot to look at sickness. It's ridiculous, of course. But that is often why we look at our world. We sanitize it. We exclude severe suffering from our sight. We have a kind of shudder feeling that we may catch it, we may get it in some way. Now, if we don't have it, that's great. It's not saying we should have it, of course. And if we don't, that's wonderful. But many people do have this feeling of fear in response to suffering. And the modern world, as I say, in a way, the modern world in a way exacerbates that neurosis, I think. I mean, it's fantastic we have so many good things in the modern world. I'm not knocking it in that way. But I think if we look, we can see that one of the consequences of the sanitization of things has been that this neurosis is even increased. And again, it's like, often when people say, I can't bear to see somebody suffering, they may think they're being compassionate for saying that. But often what they're really doing is, I don't really want to look at that. It's just too real and too overwhelming for me. So if we have that resistance, then this is the way to overcome it. But if we don't have that resistance, then that's great.
In the Nandro, in the commentary by his Holiness, in relation to breakages of vows,
yes,
there's quite a lot of cautionary stuff about contamination of person, contamination of place.
Oh, yeah.
How does that fit with?
Yeah. Well, you see, the thing is that actually we cannot be contaminated by such things unless there's already some strong impurity in us. That's what's explained actually in the tantras. And so, if we have that condition inside of us, we shouldn't deliberately seek out, for instance, people whose behavior is very degenerated, because we haven't yet overcome that tendency in ourselves. But if we actually meet such beings, then our attitude should be like this. Should be one of like great courage and great heroism. And even now when we may be training, and the advice is not to seek out such degenerated beings, we should be thinking, but mentally I take on your sufferings. I train in that way, that I aspire to take your sufferings away from you, your negativity away from you, even though right now I can't directly do anything practically with you. But the early Kadampas, they really trained in a very, very radical way, very much very, very fearless in encountering all kinds of difficulties, and training with saying, whatever befalls me, I will accept it completely. If sickness comes, I accept sickness, and so on. A little bit like the practitioners of Chur, there was this very great emphasis on not rejecting anything. Anything can be used in this way to overcome self-clinging, self-protectiveness. So it's almost like, I'm making this up, but you say like a Kadampa would deliberately go under the ladder, you know. By Kadampa I mean the early Kadampa, yes, in the early times. Yes.
Lama Jampa, people that don't know much about Buddhism criticise us in, for example, we might say that the forces of karma lead one to be ill or impoverished. How can we kind of cleverly express that idea without being blamed for having that view?
Well, I think first of all that what we say actually, what the Lord Buddha said is that not everything is karmic. Not everything is karmic. Everything is arising through dependent origination, through cause and conditions, but not everything that arises is karmic in the sense of immediately traceable to one of our actions now or in the past. Some are, but some are not. And so one should be very cautious in assigning, he was in an earthquake, therefore it's because of something he did in a past life. Earthquakes arise because of dependent origination, like everything else, tectonic plates, etc., etc. It's dependent origination. God didn't make it, and the thing just didn't happen by itself. And we are, we're born into this world in a body, so we're part of the network of cause and conditions. But that was not necessarily traceable to some action we did. So that's the first thing to say, not everything. And Buddha actually says those who say everything is karmic are over-exaggerating karma. Now, but when we train for ourselves, we should very much think, but whatever happens to me, I'm not going to blame anybody else. So how can I train in this? Well, I can think, this is not somebody else's responsibility, and I will try to find a way of training. So if it's a difficulty, I'll try to find a way to take other beings' difficulties into my difficulty. So whatever's on my plate, I will take responsibility for. That's the attitude one should have. So in that way one should think, yes, it is the wheel of sharp weapons of my past negativity that this is happening now. So that everything is karmic is a training for oneself not to blame others. And also, of course, to switch the accent here, a lot is the result of one's choices and actions. So one can definitely create a better pattern for the future, for oneself and others, by realizing how powerful one's actions are. And karma does change the world in interaction with all the other causes and conditions that are there. So the people who say this, as I say, are exaggerating karma, and they're exaggerating karma in a way Buddha said they shouldn't. And secondly, when we talked about everything, whatever's happening for me is karmic, it's a training for ourselves. Yeah, that's how we should explain it. Of course, then somebody might say, but in mind-only teaching in the Mahayana, it says everything is arising through the mind, through the imprints of the mind. That is true, but then it's not your mind, because the subject, the mind, what we think of as the self, the person, is as void, is as empty as the apparently external objects. So, even from a mind-only point of view, it is not like your personal karma is responsible for everything.
How do you distinguish between mindful recollecting and neuroses?
Yeah. Well, neurosis is like a kind of uptight policeman who's on your case at all times. Mindfulness is like coming back to the quality of this moment. That's all. There's no need to guard yourself any further. If you're with whatever is happening, you'll see it clearly without distortion. It's not like tensing and holding yourself back. Tensing and holding yourself back just actually stores up the power of the disturbing emotion, so they emerge even more forceful somewhere down the line. So he says, be mindful and drop it. I mean, like, the disturbing emotion arises, and I notice it arising. I let it go into space. I don't try and suppress it by denying it, try and squeeze it as though I'm squeezing it down and stamping on it. I simply drop it and remain in that space of having just clarity and openness. I think we can tell when mindfulness is like a tense, tight protectiveness, which is actually a servant of egoism, because you're just like building a castle around yourself to protect yourself from trouble. And real mindfulness, which is an open and relaxed and spacious clarity, in which you no longer are carried away and compelled and shrunken by the disturbing emotions. But it's a really good question, because I think many people get this fatally wrong. Mindfulness is not an anxious watching. That's like having a secret policeman on your case. A secret policeman never lead to anything good. Mindfulness leads to freedom, not secret policeman.
Lama, going back to Steve's question about karma, is there any place in the Dharma for the idea of collective karma?
Not really. No, there isn't. Again, this is a kind of idea sometimes floated around in Buddhist circles, but there isn't, no. Because actually the mind streams are individual. There's no abiding, solid, unchanging self, but mind streams are individual. That's why, unhappily for us, when Buddha became enlightened, we didn't. It happened just in Buddha's mind stream. However, when we participate in an action collectively with other people, it has a great force. It has a great force on us as well. It changes us more forceful than one that's done just in solitude. This can be a good action or a negative action. But it's not that there's a collective karma, such as one could say, a collection of people, like a race or a group or a class, have a collective karma. There's no place for that in Dharma whatsoever.